So you only need a few stocks in your lifetime. They're in your industry. I think of people, if you'd worked in the auto industry, let's say you're an auto dealer the last 10 years, you would have seen Chrysler come up with a minivan. You've seen, if you're a Buick dealer, a Toyota dealer, a Honda dealer, you would have seen the Chrysler dealership packed with people. You could have made 10 times your money on Chrysler a year after the minivan came out. Ford introduced the Taurus Sable, the most successful line of cars in the last 20 years. Ford went up 7-fold on the Taurus Sable. So if you're a car dealer, you only need to buy a few stocks every decade. When your lifetime's over, you don't need a lot of five-baggers to make a lot of money starting with $10,000 or $5,000. So in your own industry, you're going to see a lot of stocks, and that's what bothers me. There are good stocks out there looking for you, and people just aren't listening, and they're just not watching it. And they have incredible edges. People have big edges over me. They work in the aluminum industry. I see aluminum industries coming down, inventories coming down 6 straight months. They see demand improving. In America today, you know, it's hard to get an EPA permit for a bowling alley, never mind an aluminum smelter. So you know when aluminum gets tight, you just can't build 7 aluminum smelters. So when you see this coming, you can say, wait a second, I can make some money. When an industry goes from terrible to mediocre, the stock goes north. When it goes from mediocre to good, the stock goes north. And it goes from good to terrific, the stock goes north. There's lots of ways to make money in your own industry. You can be a supplier in the industry, you can be a customer. This thing happens in the paper industry, it happens in the steel industry. It doesn't happen every week, but if you're in some field, you'll see a turn, you'll see something in the publishing industry. These things come along, and it's just mind-boggling, people throw it away. One of the things I find, a couple of rules I want to throw out that I find useful, excuse me, is a lot of times people buy on the basis the stock has gone down this much. How much further can it go down? I remember when Polaroid went from 130 to 100. People said, "Here's this great company, great record. If it ever gets below 100, just buy every share." And it did get below 100. A lot of people bought on that basis, saying, "Look, it's gone from 135 to 100. It's now 95. What a buy!" Within a year, it was 18. And this is a company with no debt. I mean, this is a company. It was just so overpriced. It went down. I did the same thing in my, I think my first or second year at Fidelity. Kaiser Industries had gone from $26 a share to 16. I said, how much lower can it go? It's 16. So I think we bought one of the biggest blocks ever on the American Stock Exchange of Kaiser Industries at 14. I said, it's gone from 26 to 16. How much lower can it go? Well, at 10, I called my mother and said, Mom, you got to look at this Kaiser Industries. I mean, how much lower can it go? It's gone from 26 to 10. Well, it went to 6, it went to 5, it went to 4, it went to 3. And now I'm fortunate this happened rapidly, or I would probably be still caddying or working at the Stop and Shop, but it happened fast, so I was able to, it was compressed. And at 3, I figured out, there's something very wrong here, because Kaiser Industries owns 40% of Kaiser Steel, they own 40% of Kaiser Aluminum, they own 32% of Kaiser Cement, they own Kaiser Broadcasting, they own Kaiser Sand and Gravel, Kaiser Engineers, they own Jeep, they own business after business, and they had no debt. Now, I learned this very early. This might be a breakthrough for some people. It's very hard to go bankrupt if you don't have any debt. It's tricky. Some people can approach that. It's a real achievement. But they had no debt, and the whole company at 3 was selling at about $75 million. At that point, it was equal to buying one Boeing 747. I said, there's something wrong with this company selling for $75 million. I was a little premature at 16, but I said, everything's fine, and eventually this will work out. And what they did is they gave away all their shares to their shareholders. They passed out shares in Kaiser Cement, they passed out shares in Kaiser Aluminum, they passed out their public shares in Kaiser Steel, they sold all the other businesses, and you get about $50 a share. But if you didn't understand the company, if you're just buying on the fact the stock had gone from 26 to 16, and then it went to 10, what would you do when it went to 9? What would you do when it went to 8? What would you do when it went to 7? This is the problem that people have, is they sell stocks because they didn't know why they bought it, then it went down, and they don't know what to do now. Do you flip a coin? Do you walk around the block? What do you do? Psychiatrists haven't worked so far. I've never seen them running in. The Psychological Psychiatry Fund I've never seen listed for with the SEC to make it through as a mutual fund. So they haven't seemed to help. I've tried prayer. That hasn't worked. So if you don't understand the company, you have this problem when they go down. Eventually, they always come back. This one doesn't work either. People think RCA just about got back to its 1929 high when General Electric took it over. A lot of double knits never came back. Remember those beauties? floppy disks, Western Union, the list goes on and on. People saying it'll come back. Well, it doesn't have to come back. Here's another one you hear all the time. It's $3. How much can I lose? I've had people call me up saying, I'm thinking of buying the stock at $3. How much can I lose? Well, again, you may need a piece of paper for this, but if you put if you put $20,000 in a stock at 50, or your neighbor put $20,000 at 50 into the stock, and you put $20,000 in at 3, and it goes to 0, you lose exactly the same amount of money. Everything. And people say it's 3. How much can I lose? Well, if you put $1 million on it, you can lose $1 million. Just the fact that stock, this may be a reason to research a stock. The fact that stock is 3 down from 100 doesn't mean you should buy it. And in fact, short sellers, people that really make money in stocks, they don't short Walmart, they don't short Home Depot, they don't short the great companies, Johnson & Johnson. They short stocks down from 80 to 7. They'd like to short it at 16 or 22, but they figured out at 7 that this company is going to go to 0. They just haven't blown taps on this thing yet. It's going to 0. And they're selling it short at 7, they're selling it short at 6, at 5, at 4, at 3, at 2, at 1 1/4. And you know to sell something short, you need a buyer. Somebody has to buy the damn thing. And you wonder, who's buying this thing? It's these people saying it's 3. How much lower can it go? You know, now, here's a subject that you probably all talked about. Getting close. Getting close. All right, we'll drop that one out. It's getting very close, so everybody has to go somewhere. So the important thing is you can't get too attached to a stock. You have to understand there's a company behind it. You can't treat this like your grandchildren. No, you have to deal with the stock and say, I understand the company, and if it deteriorates, if the fundamentals slip, you have to say goodbye to it. If one rule you want to remember is the stock does not know you own it. This is a breakthrough. So don't get, you have to understand it and say they're doing well, and as long as they keep doing well, my best stocks have been my 5th, 6th, 7th year I own them, not my 5th, 6th, 7th day. So you have to understand that and stay with it. And then I'll switch through to my long shots. Avoid long shots. I bought about 30 long shots in my life. I've never broken even on one. The ones that are really bad are what we call whisper stocks. And if Arthur Levitt was here, he'd appreciate these stories. But these are the times that somebody calls you up and say, hi, Peter, how's Carolyn, how are the kids? And I'd like to talk to you about International Blivet. And what they have in this company is very good about the earnings. Earnings going to be very, they're going to be big, small. $3, $1 a share. And they keep whispering. They say, what are you talking about? I don't understand it. And these are, now, either they're so surrounded by people that are going to run out and buy this stock because it's so exciting, or they think the SEC is listening in. They'll get a shorter term. They'll get 6 months in the camp rather than 2 years in the camp. But whisper stocks don't work. And then I want to conclude with there's always something to worry about. If you own stocks, there's always something to worry about. You can't get away from it. What happens in the 50s, people were worried about the only reason we got out of the Depression was World War II. We got another recession. In the early 50s, they said we're going to go right back into a depression. People worried about a depression in the 50s, and they worried about nuclear war. I mean, back then, the little warheads they had then, they couldn't blow up McLean, West Virginia, or McLean, Virginia, or Charlestown. Now, all these countries that end in STAN, there's 9 of these STAN countries that have come out of Russia. They all have enough warheads to blow the world up, and no one worries about it. When I was a kid, people were building fallout shelters, and we used to have this civil defense drill. Remember this one in high school? You get under your desk. I never thought even then that was a particularly good thing to do. If they'd blow a whistle, somebody put on a hat, we'd all get under our desk. But in the 50s, people wouldn't buy stocks, except for the 80s. The 50s was the best decade, this century of the stock market. And people wouldn't buy stocks in the 50s because they're worried about nuclear war and they're worried about depression. Then people, remember when oil went from 4 to 40 and it was going to go to 100 and we're going to have a depression? Remember that one? Well, about 3 years later, the same experts, now higher paid, oil's now at 10, and they said it was going to go to 4, and we're going to have a depression. And then the Japanese, remember how the Japanese were going to own the world? Remember that one? And that we're going to have a depression? And then about 2 years later, we're all worried about Japan collapsing. This is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. There's a company with a 20% savings rate, incredible workforce, incredible productivity, and people were saying we're going to have a depression because Japan's going to collapse, and they had You know, on their prayer list, they load Mother Teresa and crippled children, and they were praying for Japan at night. It's unbelievable. I mean, the LDC debt. Remember the LDC debt? Remember that one? All these countries, all Chase had lent their net worth to Brazil, Chile, Peru, and all these other countries, and Soviet and all the other countries. And LD said they were not going to pay it back, and we're going to have a depression. It always ends, and we're going to have a depression. Or the Great Depression. We're going to have the Great Depression. I never could quite understand that adjective in front of depression, but the Great Depression, or the big one. The big one's coming. But all these countries, and now I understand, these are called then they were called less developed countries. Now, we used to call them underdeveloped countries. Those are all wrong terms. Those are not politically correct. You have to call these emerging countries. You can't use less developed or underdeveloped because that's... In fact, the other day I heard the politically correct term for somebody that's overweight is laterally challenged. That's so there's always something to worry about, and the key organ in your body in the stock market is your stomach. It's not the brain. If you can add 8 and 8 and get reasonably close to 16, that's the only level of math you need to know. You don't know to need the area under the curve. Remember that quadratic equation and an integral calculus and the area under the curve? I mean, whoever cared what was under the damn curve? I mean, but you had to study this. You don't need this in the stock market. So all you have to know is you're going to see, it's always going to be scary. There's going to be always something to worry about. And you just have to forget all about it. Cut it all out and own good companies or own turnarounds. Study them and you'll do well.